I'm Mandy Bishop. I'm the product owner of Clarity, and we just released Clarity 2025.1 on November 11th. And this is going to go through a bit of what's in this release, and we'll talk about the focus of the release, and then at the end we can have a bit of a Q&A session. And so some of the enhancements are focused around project management, some integration with Bluebeam, a bit of unified sync reporting, some task enhancements, and a few extra items. I'll go through each of those. Each year we have 2 releases of Clarity, one usually in May, which is supporting the Revit version release at that time, and then we have one in November, and since 2021 we've added a lot of these different technologies, whether they be integrations, Procore, ACONX, different support for data, cross-project query, different support for tasks, task targets, task splitting, unified sync, web triggers to trigger on changes, a task run, and these different areas we've added through the years. For the 2025 Clarity, we support these versions of Revit, back 5 versions. If you need to support Revit 2020, you can use a 2024.1 task server with the 2025.1 Clarity host. Onto the new additions for Clarity 2025.1. One of our focuses was project management. The statistic is that over 10,000 new projects are created per year by our customers, so that's a lot of projects to manage. A few years back, we added the ability to automatically deactivate projects based on time of inactivity. And we've added a few more bulk actions that are triggered by you instead of automatically. So on the grid view area of the project listing, there are actions you can do on multi-selected projects. So on the active list, you can deactivate or delete. And on the inactive list, you can delete or reactivate your projects from a multi-selected list. Other addition on this area is there are more columns and list details in the view. So tags, parameters, hub name, a few different areas you could filter and find a list where you'd like to do these bulk actions against. In this case, I've shown a screenshot of all the 2021 projects, and I'm just going to select them and either activate, deactivate, or delete them. We've also added a bit of an improved project scanning, and this is kind of between 2025.0 and 2025.1. We do have the ability to support multiple Clarity projects pointing to one BIM 360 or ACC source. And if you have different folder configurations for both of those projects, previously it was a bit of an issue with the scanning. The path migration tool in 2025.0 helps with that. Also, using different OAuths for those 2 different projects could be problematic if the permissions or the folder structure is different. In this release 2025.1, we are scanning on the user that is associated with the project, and so the files showed should be more realistic to what the real targets are. We've added Bluebeam integration this year, and the Bluebeam integration works exactly like BIM 360 and ACC. When you need to authenticate, you go to the server settings authentication area and you add an authentication via OAuth. It launches a separate page with a login for Bluebeam, and then it adds it to our list. You can have more than one. As you see here, I've got 2 people assigned, authorized in Bluebeam for our server. And also in the integration, the way you set it up is to set up a post-task action against a PDF task. When you set up the post-task action, the dialog that comes up is at the bottom of the screen on the left. You can select from a drop list of any existing Bluebeam sessions that you've created separately. And you have 2 options, whether to overwrite the files, which will basically remove the file that exists with the same name in your Bluebeam session and write a new one, or add a new version to the file, which if you see on the right-hand view here, this is the Bluebeam session, and we've got a few versions, V1, V2, V3. We cannot carry over the markup, but it will keep the back copies of the markup for you, and V2 will contain what markups happened. As far as Bluebeam sessions, there is an ability to create sessions via the API, so we would be interested in knowing like what type of, if that's something you would like, and if so, like what type of permissions you'd like to put on this new session. It might be something we could entertain doing in the future. For Unified Sync, we've added the ability to report, and it happens all the time for Unified Sync now, but you can make it happen only to report. So you could report and check what's going to happen before you actually run the actual migration, and tweak what files you want to do, what folders you want to include. The report contains folders and files as well as reasons. So some of the reasons would be the metadata is newer, the modified date is newer, the file version is newer, or it just doesn't exist on your target. And that's what this is showing in this screenshot. And that will give you an idea of why things are transferring as well. And this report is treated like a deliverable. So if you want to put it somewhere in a post-task action, you can pretty much put it anywhere. So in this case, in the screenshot, I'm putting it in SharePoint along with my transfer. I transferred from ACC to SharePoint, and I put the report up in a separate folder. Or you can also move and copy it to a different network location. We also changed a bit of user experience. We added a search bar for the task setup. Our customers have about an average of 250 tasks per host, and that's a lot of tasks to look at. So in this case, you can do a bit of a filter and a few actions. You can do delete and copy, and it'll remember your status at that point in time. Just gives you a better way of looking at less of your tasks. We've added the ability to schedule tasks with an ending date. If you see here in this screenshot, I've set up this task to run Tuesday and Thursday, starting on the 26th and ending on New Year's. At that point, the task will no longer be queued on schedule and will not run again. That being said, we're toying with the idea of cleanup in the future. We just need to figure out exactly what the rules would be for that kind of behavior. Also in user experience and interface, we've upgraded our UI platform. It's going to give us future flexibility in making changes that are better for usage of Clarity and make it a little more fun to use. But we did make some changes this release with a focus of readability and coherence. There were a few areas that customers had said they just are having had a little difficulty understanding, such as global metadata mapping. We just made it a little easier to understand, use, and function better. For task servers, we've added a bit of dialogue handling and in 0. I've attached the 2 screenshots here. It basically, there are some dialogue handling that we don't want to pick an option without your permission. And so this UI in the task tray gives you options to say, go ahead, resolve this dialogue when it comes up. I'm okay with it. And the second area basically says, when this dialogue comes up, pick this particular task item or button on the dialog box. In addition to that, in 2025.1, we've added a retry mechanism on open errors. You have to opt into this, but what it would do is retry up to 3 times, putting it back on the queue and allow a different task server to take a task. I mean, this could be if in downloading process or caching issues, it might resolve on the second try in a different task server or on the same task server. I've seen that happen as well. A few extras that we've added this release. We've added one-click access to any destinations we can find that might be useful. If you see in this screenshot, I've got a unified sync, and in the unified sync, you can click on your source and your destination, go straight to the folder that you are transferring and querying. So you can see, easy access to get where you have the files or are putting the files. We've also added this for post-task actions, including Bluebeam, including pretty much any link access we can get to as far as like Dropbox, Google Drive, whatever, we can put the link in there, you can get to it via the logging. We've added a few link metrics and we modified a few. So previously our CAD link metrics contained CAD links plus imports, slightly confusing. We've separated it out. Now we have CAD links and just CAD imports. We also have added CAD links with a shared location and without a shared location. Those are new. And we did keep number of imports just so that it would support previous versions if you already have that set up. For the model upgrader task, we've added an audit option. So when you open, it will audit the model and upgrade at the same time. For the Windows Task Server, we've added some information about what is installed on your machine. For example, in this screenshot, I have Autodesk Civil 3D and Navisworks Manage, and this version of Desktop Connector is 16.3. If you had multiple versions of AutoCAD, it would show all the different versions so you can have awareness of what your task servers are set up and installed on them. And that's pretty much all a summary of what we've added in 2025.1. And if you have ideas or have comments or things that you want in clarity, please reach out to us. We have a community website at imaginit.helprace.com. You can get to it through the feedback button on your host near the help button, or you can just write me directly at mbishop@ran.com. And now we're going to open it up for any Q&A. I know it's the day before Thanksgiving in the US, so we'll see if anyone has any questions.
Cool, thank you very much. So as we're looking at the questions here, at this point right now, we have just one of them in the queue. So I'll say if anybody else has some questions, let's go ahead and start typing in there furiously. Happy to take on anything that's on your mind to some extent, whether it's directly related to this What's New broadcast, or if there's anything else of questions about things that are less related. excuse me, the existing question that we've got is the latter of that. So we've got a question was asking, would we consider adding smart sheet integrations into the future?
I mean, I don't know much about Smartsheet, but it's definitely something to look into. Yeah, I'll write it down and take a look.
I'll say one of the things that I would suggest for the person that wrote down the question here, the community board that was mentioned just a moment ago that Mandy mentioned, has the option to submit requests for future enhancements or anything else like that. And like all the community boards that you have out there, the ability to comment and upvote, downvote, stuff like that. So certainly if now, certainly we've got the ability to chat directly with us, but later on, feel free to add any questions or suggestions to that section of the community board and get some feedback from colleagues outside of your own organization. Another question, can the current tasks list view be filtered by task server, separate Windows task server, and Revit task server? So can the current tasks separate by the task machine on whatever computer, but then separating Windows and Revit tasks? Currently, it shows Revit and Windows tasks in the same filter, which can make it hard to distinguish between what's a Revit-based and what's a Windows-based task.
Not presently, but this is definitely something that is in the realm of something we're thinking about doing in the future for that area. Other people have asked for that, so it is a common request.
Cool. Another question came in here. Where can I go to install Clarity 2025.1? The person asking the question mentions that they have AutoCAD 2025 on their computer. Doesn't, I would say that's not necessarily terribly relevant to installing Clarity 2025.1. But Mandy, we had sent out an email to the individual listed as the primary point of contact for Clarity at all of the different customers that have that software on subscription with us, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so and that person would have a download link to be able to go get in all the extra fun things like that. True?
Yes. And if you didn't receive it and you feel that you should have, reach out to me or support@rand.com and we can figure out where that email went.
Yeah. Or your IMAGINiT account rep. Always also a good person to help navigate and get you what you need. So when in doubt, all of the above. Support center, direct to us, or maybe even the most valuable one being your account rep. Next one, is there any way Clarity can be used to help assist with converting a Revit model from imperial to metric or vice versa and report on what was not able to be converted? I'm going to take on part of that, but I might defer some of the pieces for you, Mandy. One of the things I would say as a caution, so in my previous life, a few decades ago now, before coming to IMAGINiT, I worked on some projects where we had to do that. In this case, it was in the AutoCAD world, but we had metric, imperial, joyous things that we had to go through for some US federal projects. One of the things that I would caution, or at least make sure that everybody is aware of if you're doing some sort of a metric to imperial or vice versa conversion, is the idea of hard metric and soft metric. If you're, where are you sourcing the materials that will be going to construct, renovate, whatever, the building that you're working on? Do you need to report metric units, but you're going to be buying a imperial 3-foot door? That's one question. And if you do a direct conversion of a 3-foot door into metric, it'll be 915 point something millimeters. But if you're buying metric materials, you're not going to typically find a 915 door. You're going to have a 1 meter door or a 900 millimeter door, different types of things like that. So I would just, as a preliminary piece, just throw out the caution of make sure you've got the bigger picture in mind. And the person asking the question may already have all that, and it's all old hat, no big deal. Life is good. We've got it covered. But I wanted to throw it out there as a way to ensure that people are thinking about the bigger picture, not just they say we need metric, here we go, and it doesn't really necessarily solve the issue that's out there. If you have to convert from, we'll say, the hard imperial to hard metric, so it's real metric sized things that will be going into the building, it's never going to be as simple as click, click, convert, because you've got to be swapping out families, whether they're system families, component families, you name it. There's a lot more that goes into it than just changing the units and calling it done. So as this question was stated and saying, hey, can you report on what was not able to be converted? My presumption, right or wrong, is going to be that they were probably talking about doing that type of family swapping of an imperial door for a metric door or vice versa, and going on through there. So that as my flurry of soapbox moment going into it, I would say, Mandy, I'm not aware of anything offhand with clarity that would, in batch mode, swap out one family for another inside a project. Does that sound like I'm correct to you? I mean, you could do something through like a Dynamo task or something custom, but
Yeah, not that I can remember. And it does sound like this would be a little bit more complicated, you're right, than just, converting, units. So I guess I'd like to think about it more and actually maybe hear from the person who suggested it about how they do it now manually, to see if it is even feasible for us to attempt to do.
yeah. And I would also say that even if it gets to a spot where it's not something that we could do in batch mode, I mean, the idea of clarity is it's something that you perform over and over and over again during the course of a project, generally speaking. There might be something we could do to help out from a custom application basis, even if we're not having it as a tool directly in the clarity environment. So for everybody else that was not having to deal with that, hey, maybe you found it interesting. But moving right along, there's a request to have the ability to assign a task to a specific task server only. And now, while we don't have the ability to assign a task to an individual task server, we do have the ability to assign a project to a specific task server. Actually, we could kind of get to it anyway, though. Sorry, I'm talking and babbling, and you might have already had this in your mind, Mandy, but in the task server configuration app that we have, there's a place where you can go and say, what tasks is this machine allowed to run? So if you wanted to have a particular task only run on a machine, you could just make sure that the ability to run that task is turned off on all of your other task machines. So it'll force it to go to that one. So it's not saying you have to go to this one machine. It's more of the negative side of that equation of saying you cannot run on any of the others, in addition to the ability to tell a particular project that all of its tasks must be run on a particular or a collection of task machines. For the person that asked that question, if we need to get into any extra details, we can certainly have a side conversation on that for configuration options within the task machines, or I don't know if you would want to be showing any of those things now on a screen share, Mandy, but those are the types of options that come to my mind. I don't know if I'm missing anything in there.
That's exactly what I was thinking is two. Hold on, I'm going to see if I can get myself remoted in so I can show you guys this
Okay.
the area, because it is it's a little difficult to find if you don't know where it is.
Sure.
So I will show you.
So in here, you're remoting into essentially the task machine.
Yeah, this is one of our task machines. And so on the area where you put your host server, you can edit and go to this task tab. And in here, you can specify which type of Revit tasks you want to run or not run, and which type of Windows tasks you want to run or not run. And so if you turned off, say you wanted them only this machine to run the metrics or something, AutoCAD metrics, you could click it on for this machine, and on the other machines you just click it off, and the other machines will not take that kind of task at that point in time. They're prohibited from taking that task. And then the other option Joe was talking about is the ability to specify task servers that you want to run on. You know, say you want to run on just these two. You can set that for this particular project, so you don't have any other task servers running for this project.
Cool. This next one I'll start, and I promise I won't keep talking and turn this over to you. This one's in part it's me being not nice because I know there's some things that we're working through with it, but the request here was to allow Clarity to be able to print from AutoCAD using the sheet set manager. And I'll say that there's a little bit of that because I believe we've had some things come into our support center recently where there have been some issues with sheet set manager and AutoCAD printing, but the feature does exist.
It's true. You can pass a DST into the AutoCAD print, and it should be able to print all the drawings that are in the sheet set manager. I don't know if there are any open tickets against it, like you say, but it's in there, the ability to do it. There are some limitations. I don't think you can do it from ACC projects or BIM 360 at this moment. I think it's mostly, file based. So that's a limitation for sure.
Cool. And maybe that's what I was thinking of, somebody running into trying to run it off of a DST that is a AutoCAD for Web DST file for Autodesk Docs and Collaborate Pro. That may be the case. I'd have to look back at tickets for that. But if you're looking if you're in a task, let's say a PDF print or other type of task, and you're in the file selection section, the target area of the task, if you have a DST, if you have a DST and it's in the folder structure that Clarity is looking at, it should show up in your list of what to print, and you can just say print DST instead of print DWG. Has anyone reported issues in terms of Revit hanging due to the desktop connector crashing and tasks failing? I'd say I haven't heard necessarily of it being specifically desktop connector crashing, but I know that there's never-ending Autodesk slipping in updates to the desktop connector, and then on our side we find out after the fact that there's an update and we need to adjust our coding accordingly. But I'm not aware of specifically desktop connector. Go ahead, sorry.
Not typically with Revit as much, though. I have seen some issues with the Windows Task Server and the DWG selections, trying to select and gather data for that, and sometimes with desktop connector in the past, not as much lately. But if you do run into something like that and you can send in diagnostics, we do actually in 2025.0 have a separate log area for the automatic selection of projects, and which happens in Desktop Connector, which could be helpful. And that might be useful to us to try to figure out what you're seeing.
Cool. Are Revit build numbers included with either machine software information when tasks are performed or on models or when doing metrics tasks? I know we record that information. I guess the question I would have for the person that was asking the question was recorded where, I guess would be the piece. I don't know that we record the build number in our task logs, but it's certainly inside the journal file that's associated with the task, and we can capture Revit build numbers when doing some machine querying of what versions of Revit are installed across the network.
And if you know, we do put what machine ran the task. And if you knew which task server ran the tasks, we do have the build numbers listed in that same area where the Windows task server has the build numbers listed. So you could see the build number on the machine that ran it in that fashion.
Cool. So the data is there. We just may need to work with you on finding it wherever it might have to be. Okay.
I was going to show that.
Type it over there. Cool. Test servers include part of it. Okay.
So this tells you some of the Revit information on this machine. It's not down to the actual, I mean, it's to the version, not really the build number, but.
Cool. Okay. Related to what is new for 25.1, person says, I think you mentioned that filters are staying on when we edit a task and go back to the previous page. Is that true for all panels?
I don't know about editing a task. It would be more for copying and deleting tasks. I think editing, you're going to lose your filtering at that point in time. But most of the search bars work similarly, and I would think other areas would also keep the filter on if your operations like stay on that page, basically.
Okay. And this next one is a how can you, but it really is a bit more of a feature request to get a project standards list with model metrics, not just the counts. So instead of saying how many text styles you have, what are the text styles? What are the object styles? What are the dimension styles? So a much more detailed export of information as opposed to just counts of those things.
Interesting.
And we get a little bit of that with the performance advisor aspect of the task, but that's different from the rest of what we've got with model metrics. We would get some of those things inside a database export report, but not all of them. So yeah, so request of grabbing more detailed information, not just quantity counts. There's a, going back to our question about metric and imperial, there's a confirmation of yes, hard metric, and yes, hard metric sizes to make sure people just don't convert something and they're using the actual correct stuff. So happy to know that I was, at least to some extent, interpreting the question correctly, but we're still at that spot where clarity is not really an ideal thing for that at this time. A question for elaboration from you, Mandy. Can you elaborate on the improvements you briefly mentioned during the slide deck made to project rescan functions? Are project rescans now more efficient?
It depends on how you have your project set up. They could be more efficient in the cases where you have an OAuth associated with one mapping to a BIM 360 ACC project in Clarity, and then another OAuth, different OAuth in a different Clarity project pointing to the same BIM 360 and ACC project in the back end, because the scanning, previously the scanning would need to do both, just to get all the files for you, and now it's more targeted as far as which files it needs to get. So it's really dependent on how focused your user is and your working folder is for your projects that you've mapped in Clarity to BIM 360 and ACC.
Okay, cool. Question, feature request. Is it possible in the future to create a task sequence that is independent of a specific model or drawing target? So for example, sequencing out 10 tasks so that these 10 tasks will always happen together, but you're not assigning it to a specific target or project.
And what would be the target in that case? The one that's assigned with the defined task?
I think it's more like as if we were to say, set up a task. Can we have a task sequence as a task template? I think that is right. I don't know. It's a good question. So if I go, I'm looking at my version of things. So a task template, we can add an individual task. So I guess really in my interpretation of it is a task sequence template. So you can say, here's my set of things I want to do, and now apply this template to these different projects. Not just a single task, but a sequence as a template.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like I've heard this a few times before, and it's definitely in our list of things that we're thinking about, but I will revisit and see. Yeah, it's a good idea. Let me just revisit and see, like, can it be done, how much work it is, and if it's doable.
Cool. Next up, we've got a question of, and the answer to this is yes. Can Clarity do model upgrades on Revit Server? For example, upgrading from Revit 2023 to 2025. Not only do we have to update the file, but we have to move it to a different folder. Now, it may take a series of tasks that we string together to make everything happen. And it also depends on how your Revit server environment is set up. Do you have a unique server set up for each version of Revit server, or just different folders on the same server? So there's some details we'd have to work through. But yes, we can. Combination of doing, maybe it's a file copy task and then an upgrade, or upgrade the file and then move it over to the next version of Revit server. But the answer to that one is absolutely yes, we can. We don't really care too much about where the files are. We can do almost everything everywhere. Question, can the API to launch tasks also allow sending to a specific machine? And can it provide the task target parameters when launching through our API? Is that a let's get back to you on it?
Yeah, I would have to look into our API. I know that we use a particular API to do the launch from Clarity Client. So I don't know if we pass in the parameters, but I suspect we do. I just would have to see if that's something we could expose.
Okay. We have a person asking about AutoCAD eTransmit. Not sure if the question was asked. I don't recall having an AutoCAD eTransmit thing, so either asking again here for the time we have left, or let's have a separate follow-up conversation, but we haven't had a question about that come through. Is there existing documentation with recommendations for keeping task servers operational? I regularly have failed tasks due to the task server rebooting due to Windows updates, and the user account that Clarity runs under is no longer logged in. Another thing that happens sometimes is having to re-authenticate to ACC.
The restarting of your task servers, I've seen it recommended that there's a system utility that you could have on the machine that would automatically log you in so that you don't have that problem anymore. It basically just it's a tool to log you into the Windows desktop that you can set up if your company allows it. I think some people do that. I mean, and then there is the notification that the task is no longer that the task server is no longer, communicating, which gives you an indication that has happened. But those are the two ways that I've seen it solved. And as far as a document that we have, I am not certain if we do or not. I think I would reach out to Sherry Pittman and see if we do have something like that we've provided before.
Okay. We do have somebody coming back in here, going back to the desktop connector crashing, that they do have that issue. I'll just refer back to what Mandy was saying, is especially if you're in 2025, soon to be .1, because of course you'll be doing the upgrade, that we can take a look at some of that extra data that's coming through, and what version of desktop connector are you on, and things like that through our support center. Let's see what we can help you with there. Does Clarity have a mechanism to check the year version of a Revit file on its own? So not what you specify the project to be, but to be able to say this is a version X Revit file.
We do some of that in monitoring service for the file-based projects. So we do have the ability to do that. I'm not sure what you want to do with it, but it is something you can do.
Right.
Now,
if it's a project, we do that automatically. It just naturally happens, but we don't. It cannot do that for ACC BIM Collaborate Pro projects. Is that correct?
I mean, I don't think if it's in the cloud, I'm not certain there's an API for that. So it would have to be, downloaded or, be able to get to the actual file in some way to do it. So not just asking the cloud, that kind of thing, I think.
Yeah, I know that there's some that we can do to try and query if it's a recently created project, and by now it's probably within maybe the last year or so, because we've got our tool to create a new Clarity project when it sees a new project in the cloud in ACC, and we are able to query like the header of the Revit file or something along those lines to make our interpretation of what the Revit file is, so that we can set the version of the Clarity project appropriately.
That is correct.
I don't think we've got anything that will go back and retroactively scan a project to say, hey, I said this was a Clarity 2025 Revit 2025 project. Was I right? I don't think we've got anything that will validate. So maybe that'd be a good feature request thing, is have a button that says, check my Revit files. Did I get it right? Question, do you have any templates for Power BI when analyzing the database export? I will say from my side, and then get your opinion as well, Mandy. We've done some things for customers based off of what they wanted to look at, but some of those things that we've done for customers have been for those customers, so it's now their stuff. We've created some random things on our own for things that we want to look at, but my statement to the person asking the question is more of, well, what do you want to see? And then we could have a conversation around that, as opposed to, we've got some generic things that mean nothing to you as an end user of Clarity versus IMAGINiT as the product developer. I don't know if you've seen anything different, Mandy.
No, I would totally agree. Most of it's been custom or just internal for our own usage.
Okay, cool. That same person was commenting back for some of, I believe this will be back to the question about model metrics going deeper to say, what are my text styles? What are my object styles and things like that? This person's suggestion to say, workaround for that is, and this is a good one, use the model checker. So we can set up a model checker check and then have Clarity run on a regular basis. And the model checker can get to some of those detailed lists of what types of things do exist inside Revit projects. Question just in general on the Clarity API, have there been any enhancements to the API? He'd like to be able to create task sequences versus the API, and that was not possible last time he checked.
It is not in this release. It is something that has been asked for by multiple people, though.
Okay. Is there a way to kill Windows tasks? They don't seem to remove from queue despite the log saying that the kill is requested.
Well, it should try to kill them, but if it's not actually succeeding, really the only way to remove them would be to stop and start the service again, or wait until, you know, they get cleaned up. If you're having issues with killing the Windows tasks, though, I would say send in the diagnostic so we can at least, you know, try to fix the problem if there is one.
Cool. And two remaining here. First one is a feature request. We've got a lot of those today. That's nice. Thank you, everybody. To be able to program a different time for each day of the week for a task. So example, we publish every Friday night, but would like to publish before the weekly coordination beginning at 2 p.m. on Wednesday. So right now they have to create two different tasks for that, but it'd be nice to have one task with different run times. Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so we're still at 2 because somebody else typed a new one in here. A question going back to the, or further clarification on the Power BI thing. Can we provide examples of what types of analysis customers have run besides things like looking at rooms and spaces in Power BI? I'll say that from my end of things, what I've used on a Power BI statement more often is more related to reports about Clarity performance have been a lot of the Power BI. So this is again like the developer side of things. I've created some different Power BI reports looking at not just tasks and things like that we get in the dashboards in Clarity normally, but also pulling things out like grabbing the first few characters, you know, a couple dozen characters of the error name or the error description for a particular task, and then grouping things together so that I can do a little bit more of a data analysis behind what are the more common types of errors that are happening, not just sat in new status for too long, but let's go a little bit deeper and figure out, is it because you know, Revit was, something happened when Revit was trying to open up the file, or is it because, like somebody was saying earlier, the task machine was caught in a reboot and wasn't logged back in again, or how many times did a task fail because it couldn't find the target because, you know, perhaps permissions issues or things like that. So a lot of what I've done from a BI side is to dig into Clarity's performance and the types of things that it's running into in more dynamic ways than we have natively through the Clarity dashboards that exist today. I don't know if you've seen or done anything else other than that, Mandy?
Well, there are, I think there are on their YouTube probably a couple of demos done with the new TopoJSON, using the TopoJSON task and Power BI to do some visualization. And I think if you look on the IMAGINiT YouTube page, there might be more than just one there. I know that for certain that one's probably there, and then there may be another one also showing some ways to use it with your models.
Awesome, cool. And the last question currently in the queue. Is there a tool in Clarity that will check an ACC project when the project is upgraded or the ACC project name and number has been changed? And then for Clarity to update the Clarity project. So you go into ACC and you say, upgrade all my models from 2024 to 2025. Clarity sees that happened and says, oh, well, I'll change my assignment for the project so that we launch the correct version of Revit and it's all happy.
There is not a tool for that, but it is something that could be done. I mean, we're doing it to create new projects. We're already kind of watching. So the two suggestions were the version and the number. What's the other suggestion?
Well, it was either looking at the project name or the project number or the Revit version, the version of the Revit files. I'd say those three things could be considered triggers for us to back check and say, do we have the correct version assignment in Clarity?
We don't presently, but I think the API is there. You know, we probably could do it.
Some of the basic framework we got. And with that, I think that is everything.
Well, I really appreciate all of you coming to this webinar and asking such relevant and interesting questions and participating. And I hope you guys have a nice vacation if you're off for Thanksgiving. And thank you again.